The Abusive Ex Syndrome. This is a very significant red flag, and one that you are probably familiar with, may well have heard in your own interaction with a narcissist, and if not, it is something that you need to be aware about to protect yourself from potential future ensnarement by narcissists. The Abusive Ex Syndrome is used by narcissists as part of the pursuit of the prime aims of control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. What is it? Well, it is making reference to the ex-partner of the narcissist, usually the immediate ex, but it can include exes further back, and labelling them as abusive, possibly even calling them narcissists, and doing so at an early stage in the interaction between the narcissist and the new victim, for instance, as a friendship begins, or during dating. To understand more about this, we should begin by understanding how an abusive ex would be mentioned in a dynamic where there is no narcissist involved. I raise this as the comparison will be helpful, and also, of course, some of you will be wondering, well, I know I'm not a narcissist, or at least I think I'm not, but I talked about the abuse that I suffered at the hands of the past narcissist with somebody new that I was dating. Am I guilty of indulging in the abusive ex syndrome? Maybe I'm a narcissist. Let me explain, and that will provide you with reassurance. When you're an adult and you're dating, invariably everybody, or nearly everybody, has some kind of relationship history. You might have been married, you might have lived with somebody. You will have probably had a number of boyfriends or girlfriends, sexual partners. Even those who are empathic may have had several relationships dependent upon age. And therefore, that means that when you meet somebody new in a romantic setting, i.e., perhaps getting chatted up at a bar or going on a date, invariably the issue as to status and past romantic relationships will be brought up. It's a fair question. So, for instance, people are commonly asked, have you been single for long? Or have you been dating for long? Are you dating anybody else? Have you been married? Do you have children? Such questions. And these all lead back to the issue of a previous relationship. Where somebody who has suffered an abusive relationship and is not a narcissist is asked about a previous relationship, what they will not do at an early stage of their involvement with the new person is to give chapter and verse as to what has happened to them. Why? Quite simply, the victim of the abuse has emotional empathy for the person that they're talking to. They inherently recognise the boundary. They don't need to control this person that they're talking to. They have an accountability for their life. They don't operate with a sense of entitlement. And whilst it might be tempting for the victim who has been abused to say to the new person, my ex was a complete bastard, schmuck, cheat, beat me up, etc., and go into chapter and verse about it, that individual will not do so for the reasons that I've just enunciated. They will recognise that, in effect, it's too much too soon, that they won't want to share all of that information, that they don't think that it's right to dump all of that information on the new person. Indeed, they may not want to talk about it because it's unpleasant to do so, and therefore, what they may well do is explain, yes, I was married, divorced, it didn't work out. There were differences between us, you know how it goes. Or, it was a difficult relationship, he cheated on me. Or, it was a difficult relationship, he caused me particular problems, but it's not something that I'd like to discuss at the current time. And the other person, being empathic, won't press. They'll recognise that it is a sensitive subject. And therefore, in the circumstances, the individual who has been the victim of abuse will make mention of it, but only in a slight way, without going into considerable detail about it, but only when asked about previous relationships. They won't sit down and suddenly say, I'm really pleased to be seeing you. The last guy was an absolute arsehole. He beat me up, he cheated on me. Because describing all of that, when the individual that you're dating hasn't even asked about it, is a failure to recognise a boundary. It exhibits a sense of entitlement. It shows a lack of accountability. So a genuine victim who has emotional empathy will mention that the last relationship or one prior was difficult when asked about that relationship, but will not go into huge amounts of detail about it. Furthermore, that individual will share about the ins and outs of what has happened to them at an appropriate time further into the relationship with this new person, when it's more settled, when perhaps there's exclusivity, that they might sit down and then explain, offer more of the information, or by invitation go into greater detail. But they will do so when they feel more established with the relevant individual, again recognising boundaries, exhibiting emotional empathy. And therefore, that is the way that somebody with genuine emotional empathy will operate, having suffered an abusive relationship. They will make reference to it when asked about it. They will not go into huge amounts of detail. It will not be expansive, detailed, a long monologue about how they were treated. It will not be spoken about with hyperbole, in an overly emotional way. And they will wait to provide further detail until they feel more comfortable with the person that they are dating when they're in a more established relationship. So that's how it manifests when dealing with a situation between somebody who has been abused, meeting somebody new, and neither of them are narcissists. Now, let us compare the situation with its use in a dynamic with the narcissist. How does it manifest? Not all narcissists will necessarily use this, but many do. And, in essence, it is a form of triangulation, smearing, that is utilised by the narcissist about the ex or a previous ex. You'll be told about what a bitch she was, that he was a controlling megalomaniac who beat me up, never let me see the children, controlled my money, and you will be taken through in minute detail the circumstances of it. Certain narcissists, particularly mid-range, will almost give you a diarised recollection of what has occurred. So it started off and everything was all right, and then all of a sudden she started to do this to me, or he started to do this to me, and month by month you will feel as if you are reliving the events in glorious crikey vision. The narcissist will not spare you the detail. You'll be told about how they were hurt, how they felt, how they tried to make things work. The full horror of the manipulations, the full detail of the abuse, the rape, the sexual assaults, the beating, all such information will be provided, and it will be provided far too early. Invariably, too much, too soon. It will be provided to you maybe even on the first date, or while you're being, you might have been stood at a bar and the narcissist come over and started talking with you and then offers this information. And therefore there will be a large amount of information which is provided at a very early juncture. So that is how it manifests. But why does the narcissist utilize the abusive ex syndrome, in the sense of why does the narcissist view the ex as abusive? Two reasons. First of all, there may be the revision of history, namely that the narcissism changes the recollection of the unaware narcissist so that he truly or she truly believes that they have been abused, when no abuse actually ever took place, that the ex was mild-mannered, indeed that the ex was the person who was being abused. But the narcissism rewrites history to cause the narcissist to believe that they were being abused, and it is pure fantasy. Events will be made mention of, circumstances occurring, and you may find that if there is more than one recollection, that there are discrepancies in how this is provided, events perhaps being in a different order, events omitted, new ones created, the variance of the behaviour altering. So in some instances, the narcissism rewrites history. So the narcissist that makes use of the abusive X syndrome truly believes it happened, but it actually didn't. The second aspect is where there were behaviours by the X which might be viewed from the narcissistic perspective as abusive, but it's where, in essence, the victim fought back. So the victim, because their emotional empathy was eroded by the abuse that they were suffering, this abuse being an external stressor, lashed out at the narcissist. So they started giving silent treatments, or they upped and left, or they physically fought back when they were being attacked, or they physically fought back when the narcissist was trying to make them do something sexual that they didn't want to do, that they started to divert money themselves in order to protect them. And all of these behaviours are a reaction to the abuse that has been meted out at them by the narcissist. But again, because of the narcissistic perspective, the narcissist does not see that he was the protagonist. He regards himself or herself as the victim of the abusive behaviour. It is as if a film has been made and the narcissist has edited, because this is the way the narcissism works, the first bit, namely removing their behaviour, which provoked the fight back from the victim. So in the narcissist's recall of what happened, all they perceive is the response of the victim, but not what caused that in the first place. The narcissist's role has been removed, and all they see, having edited this through their unconscious narcissism, they've not done it purposefully, all they see is that they were subjected to certain behaviours. And this is instances where the narcissist may have involved the police or obtained a restraining order, because the victim has behaved in a particular way, but only because the narcissist acted in a way towards them first. They didn't do it over nothing. However, from the narcissistic perspective, of course, in order to assert control, to avoid accountability, to extract fuel, the narcissistic perspective sees the behaviour of that victim as the victim being the aggressor and the narcissist being the victim. So, the narcissist will make reference to the abusive X for the purpose of this syndrome, either through the revision of history, completely fabricating what has happened, or the altered narcissistic perspective, which has omitted the narcissist's own role in provoking the victim to behave that way and ring-fencing the victim's response and labelling it as a provocation of its own right. Why then does the narcissist feel the need to bring up with you, the new victim, the behaviour of the old victim? Why does the narcissist utilise the abusive X syndrome? Firstly, it's done out of a sense of entitlement. The narcissist is able to talk about whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and with whom he soever chooses. Furthermore, it's done out of a lack of emotional empathy. There's no emotional empathy towards you, as a person newly arrived in the fuel matrix of the narcissist. There's no emotional empathy for thinking about how you may not want to hear all of this. There's no emotional empathy towards the previous victim either, in terms of telling lies about them or distorting what had occurred. There's a lack of accountability also for the behaviour of the narcissist. There is the blame shifting, the projection. And of course, this is all done as a pursuit of the prime aims, namely control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. But why does it happen? Well, it happens like this. When you, let us say, start dating with the narcissist needs to bring you under control. And, as explained in the Golden Period and other videos, we start off by seducing you. So, our behaviours towards you will be benign manipulations, flattery, compliments, bribery, taking you to pleasant places, being supportful, interesting, mirroring your likes and dislikes. So far, so good. No need to mention anybody else. It's all about you. However, at some point, the former intimate partner primary source, if that was the status of the X, and for the sake of this video, let's assume that that is their position, comes up on the radar, you might ask the narcissist, so, have you been dating long? Have you been single long? What was your last relationship like? When you do that, you bring the ex, the former IPPS, onto the radar of the narcissist. At that point, the narcissism says, is the ex under control? The answer to that will be, in the unconscious, no. The first law of narcissism applies, which is, all appliances must be brought under control, and therefore the narcissism will use the 3 assertions of control. And I urge you to obtain this very important material from the Knowledge Vault, the 3 assertions of control, to help you understand why and how this is used. In the circumstances, a direct assertion of control over the former IPPS isn't appropriate. The narcissist is sat having dinner with the IPSS, and therefore, in those circumstances, isn't suddenly going to hoover the ex in order to assert control over them. That will cause problems with the control of the IPSS, which is in front of them. So a direct assertion of control isn't applicable. But the narcissism still needs to assert control over the former IPPS who has been placed on the radar as a consequence of the mention of them by the new victim, the IPSS. Therefore, the narcissism shifts to indirect control, which manifests as triangulation and smearing. And therefore, in order to continue to gain control over the new victim, who is sat in front of the narcissist, and to assert control over the previous victim, the former IPPS, the narcissism selects the application of the Abusive Ex Syndrome and starts talking about how the ex was horrible, that she was a bitch, that she was abusive, that he was a narcissist, that he beat me up, that she did this, that he did that. And what that then enables to do is, when the new victim is sympathetic, I'm sorry to hear that, that must have been awful for you, goodness me, what a lot you've had to endure, their sympathy, of course, provides fuel. Their sympathy also shows that they're coming under control, so there's no issue with regard to the control of the new victim in that moment. The narcissist pity play, by smearing the former IPPS, is allowing the narcissist to assert control over the new victim and gain fuel from them. No problem there. Moreover, the support that has been exhibited by the new victim by sympathizing with the narcissist about how they were apparently treated by the ex allows the narcissist in the unconscious to feel that he has got control over the former IPPS. And because the narcissist has to have control over anybody who is in the fuel matrix who comes on the radar, the Abusive Ex Syndrome is a marvelous way of achieving that. It enables the narcissist to assert control over you, who are dating the narcissist, and at the same time assert control over the former IPPS, the ex. And that is why it is used. It is a combination of triangulation, smearing, and pity play. Sometimes you might not have mentioned the ex, but the ex pops into the head of the narcissist because it's the realms of dating and relationships. They're there on a date with you, they just happen to remember their ex. And as part of asserting control over you, the narcissist will smear the ex to make you feel sorry for them. So, in some instances, it is driven by a need to assert control over the ex and have the collateral consequence of controlling you. In some instances, it is also done to just primarily control you by causing you to feel sorry for the narcissist. And of course, the collateral consequence in that instance is the assertion of control over the ex. It depends how it's mentioned. If you raise it, then it needs to be control over the former IPPS first and you secondly. If it just happens to be mentioned by the narcissist, they're doing it primarily to control you But because they've mentioned it, which means that the X has come up on the radar, the X also has to be controlled, and the smearing assists with that also. The X just pops into the sixth sphere of influence of the narcissist, just appears in the narcissist's head, and of course as soon as they do, that is a potential Hoover trigger. No Hoover occurs because the narcissism determines that it's not appropriate to suddenly start texting or ringing up or leaving the table and going seeing the X, and instead control is asserted over them not by hoovering but indirectly by smearing them to you, the new victim. So the Abusive Ex Syndrome is, if you like, an amalgam of certain manipulations over two appliances in the fuel matrix. You, as the new victim, somebody who might become the intimate partner primary source, and also the former intimate partner primary source. It allows the gathering of fuel from you also. The Abusive Ex Syndrome could also be used in circumstances to obtain sympathy from a non-intimate secondary source. So, for example, friends, family, maybe a therapist, maybe a colleague. So to talk about how my ex-wife gave me a hell of a time, I'm not able to concentrate still, I need extra support at work. Pity play, smearing of the X, again, two appliances controlled. So whilst the Abusive Ex Syndrome ordinarily appears in circumstances where the narcissist is involved with a new victim of an intimate nature, it can also be used with non-intimate secondary sources, family members, colleagues, friends, other individuals that the narcissist knows well, for instance, a therapist. Finally, which type of narcissists use it? Well, all narcissists can do, and upper mid-range and graters don't tend to use it so much as a pity play, but rather just to get approval and agreement from the new victim. They will state it more as a matter of fact that it happened and, oh, I'm not so bothered, but I feel that you need to know about it. And when that new victim goes, that must have been horrendous, oh, I deal with it. But the fact that you've said, oh, it must be horrendous, shows that you're on side and allows that control to be asserted. But the narcissists that use it most of all are lower mid-range, middle range type A, and middle range type B. The reason being, they are more likely to use pity plays, and they are also more likely to revise history with regard to the behaviour of the ex, who actually didn't do anything wrong, save from the narcissistic perspective. So the Abusive Ex Syndrome is a form of manipulation. It is a common one, and it is an amalgam of triangulation, smearing, and pity play, utilised by the narcissist to assert control over the new prospect, the intimate partner secondary source that they're dating, somebody who might become the intimate partner primary source, and also over one or more exes as former intimate partner primary sources. Sometimes it can also be used to smear friends, in terms of, my friend was horrible to me when seeking sympathy from another friend. So it will manifest in that way. And it can be used to smear an intimate partner secondary source. Oh, I went out on some dates with this woman, she was crazy. It wasn't an intimate partner primary source, but again, the narcissist is describing a perceived behaviour of somebody else to control the person in front of them. So it can manifest with regard to different appliances, but the most common manifestation of it is the narcissist using it to control an intimate partner secondary source of a shelf variety, i.e. someone they've just started a relationship with or are dating, moving them into being the candidate intimate partner secondary source, and to assert control over the former intimate partner primary source. What it also does, and this is a collateral consequence, unless it is done by a greater or the ultra, where this is done by the lesser or mid-range, they don't do this with the intention of this happening, but it is a collateral consequence which assists them. It means that should the former IPPS come along and approach the new victim and say, for instance, you want to stay away from him, he's an abuser, that individual, having listened to the smear campaign about you as the former victim, will turn around and say, no, you're the abuser, I know all about you. They have in effect been brainwashed by the application of the Abusive Ex Syndrome. You, as the ex, have been painted as the nutcase, the psycho, the nut job, the Fruit Loop. And so if you try to warn the new victim, you shouldn't be with him or her, your attempts will fail because you crash against the effects of the smear campaign that were used to control the new victim and also control you without your knowledge as the former intimate partner primary source. But remember, the lesson mid-range does not set out specifically to do that. It is a collateral consequence of the assertion of control in the moment over the intimate partner primary source, the former intimate partner primary source, and the current intimate partner secondary source. Control is in the now when utilized by those narcissists, and it has the collateral consequence of the repeated assertion of control in the now by smearing the X to the new victim means that should the X approach the new victim is likely to disbelieve them and support the narcissist, thus preserving the narcissist's control over the new victim and keeping the X away. And that is the Abusive Ex Syndrome. Thank you for listening.